Umkhonto weSizwe Party says it will continue with pursuing a private prosecution of President Cyril Ramaphosa over Phala Phala. This comes after the National Prosecuting Authority announced that it would not be prosecuting the president. To tell us more, I'm now joined by MK Party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndhlela. Ndhlela, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. So on Friday, the MK Party's chief whip, Mr. Mzwanele Manyi, expressed and rather questioned the bizarre decision by the NPA not to prosecute President Ramaphosa or anyone in that matter. Why does your party find this odd?
Well, we find that odd and extremely so, because clearly the NPA has not taken into consideration the glaring evidence that's out there. I mean, we need to look at the sequence of events here. One of those being, let's ask simple questions, and maybe the NPA needs to tell us if they did apply their minds as it pertains to the following. The manifest of the flight into South Africa from this businessman. We need that, the date, the point of entry. And let's not forget that it was during COVID. Customs declarations from SARS, which person, the certificate, the recipient. We need to know that certificate and that receipt. The names of those officials that issued the receipt from SARS. The receipt of the animals to the buyers. Financial Intelligence Center needs to tell us that whether when you receive dollars for a transaction during COVID, is it legal tender? We know you can't transact in dollars in the country. Why was this transaction allowed to be facilitated in dollars? And then off the back of that, let's not forget that the president himself confirmed that indeed he was transacting. Now, Section 89, and if you look at the prescripts of being a president, you are not allowed, per the prescripts, to actually conduct business. He confirmed that he was doing business. And also, why is the transaction, if it's done legally, in a form of a presentation in dollars, in couches? Why in couches? Why mattresses? These are things we need to ask ourselves. And we know the person that brought these funds into the country, that facilitated these funds into the country. And the question then becomes, with SARS, when they came to the declaration, if they say that they did, where is that receipt and where in the system was it? Was it declared in that financial year? Because remember, we found out about it as South Africans 2 years later. So was it declared? Because we know you can't now try and influence an automated system. SARS automated this process. And they tried, we know, to try and input this manually. We can't allow this.
Now, we also know that the chief whip of your party asked when a nolle prosecute certificate would be issued in order for the MK party to have the private prosecution process kick in. And of course, the NPA National Director, Ms. Shamila Batoy, hit back in saying that we need to caution against the abuse of private prosecutions to further agendas. What's your take on that response?
Well, we know that Shamila Batoy, and that's the biggest problem. When you look at issues of separation of powers, we need to take this into consideration. The fact that Shamila Batoy was appointed by Cyril Ramaphosa, first and foremost, who is, by the way, a Pravin Gordhan person. Now, they're talking about, whether there would be admissible evidence or not. There is admissible evidence. Maybe another thing that we need to raise is the following. Certain individuals that were part and parcel of this robbery are now dead. They've been killed. We know. This happened in Namibia. And then they talk about the issues regarding forex exchange controls. We want the following. We want the Reserve Bank governor to put this in an affidavit. We want the commissioner of the FIC to state categorically and put it in an affidavit. We want the SARS commissioner to put it in an affidavit to say, indeed, they follow suit, that there is no criminality and that there is no transaction that happened in this, or that there is a transaction that happened in this nature and that they were all aware of that. We need to know that off the back of a transaction that was facilitated in dollars and legal tender. So Shamila Batoy, we know, is a puppet of Cyril Ramaphosa. We can't take anything that she says seriously.
When you speak of evidence, Nhlamulo, I mean, the NPA spokesperson, Tunzi Maha, was giving reference to what the Director of Public Prosecutions in Limpopo concluded, and he said there was no reasonable prospect of a successful prosecution based on the evidence that is contained in the docket. Is the MK party privy to evidence that we don't know of, hence the forging forward with the private prosecution?
Oh, absolutely. We've got glaring evidence. Part of that is we know that there's an individual who was close and who is close to Cyril Ramaphosa, who was his runner, who went and tried to influence a certain advocate to draft an affidavit. We have that evidence, we know, including other glaring evidence, because they were trying to now manipulate the SARS system to show that, try and backdate the transaction in the SARS system. Unfortunately, the SARS system is automated, you see. Tom Moyane automated the tax system. It's no longer manual. When he was commissioner, he automated the tax system. So you can't backdate a transaction post facto, unfortunately for them. And that's part of the evidence that we have. And they try to get an advocate to participate in criminality. We're dealing with criminality. The president is found with glaring evidence to be involved in criminality. And the president must be prosecuted, and the NPA must ensure that they deliver according to their mandate as a Section 9 institution to ensure that they prosecute the president.
So how does your party then, Nhlamulo, view the role of the judiciary and just the rule of law and the separation of powers in ensuring transparency and accountability in cases involving high-profile individuals, especially public officials, in terms of allegations of misconduct or abuse of power that have implications for governance and just public trust in the democratic process?
Well, when it comes to separation of powers, one of the things that we need to look into is that should the commissioner of police be appointed by the president, should the public protector be appointed by the president, should the head of the NPA be appointed by the president, these are all Section 9 institutions that are supposedly or supposed to be operating independently. We have seen recently how the courts and this judiciary, and this is what we need to highlight. Judges are lawyers who are catapulted into public office to being judges. They are lawyers. They're nothing else than lawyers, advocates. But we've given them too much power where they can now participate and influence and try and meddle in gerrymandered decisions that are taken by the parliament or the National Assembly. Like we've seen with Dr. Thorpe. A decision is taken that he must participate in the JSC, yet you find mere lawyers who are not elected, who participate and preside over the decisions that Parliament has taken, where parliamentarians as lawmakers have taken those decisions, democratically so. So, our judiciary is now being used, as is the case with what happened with President Zuma, to settle political scores. So that's why we are advocating for parliamentary sovereignty, and we need to scrap this constitution and these judges that sit in the Constitutional Court. We don't need them. We can have a Supreme Court of Appeal. Judges are there to interpret the law, not even implement the law, to interpret the law and decisions and laws that have been taken by South Africans via Parliament. That is what we need to ensure that we address.
So then how can the private prosecution route of this particular case contribute to addressing these gaps and limitations and concerns that the court's decisions not to prosecute President Ramaphosa in the Phala Phala case? And how does the party aim to ensure that the legal process is conducted fairly and transparently?
Well, one of the things that you'll realize is that we don't just engage in court processes for just the purpose of engaging in court processes. Part of the reason why we do this is because we want to put it on record to expose this system that you also referred to. And this is one of the ways of exposing it. Now, bringing a private prosecution is part of exactly that. We need to, and we've said, we will deal with the Phala Phala issue inside Parliament and outside of Parliament. And we'll use any prescripts within the law to deal and to surface the issues that South Africans themselves are concerned about when it comes to this president that is a constitutional delinquent. So it's important that as South Africans, and I've said this a number of times, and many other people who have engaged me have raised this, Umkhonto Sizwe is the only party that has actually put a magnifying glass on the happenings and the underhandedness, the cloak and dagger activities that are happening within this judicial system that we have. Many South Africans have now woken up to things they never knew. So if it means that launching a private prosecution case will continue to expose that and surface these issues so that South Africans can be aware of what kind of person it is that is basically loitering in the union buildings when they should not be there as a president representing them, then so shall it be. We will do so.
So in the absence of that nolle prosequi certificate not being issued, what would be your next step?
We will deal with that at the right time and accordingly.